Let's review how to add and subtract negative fractions. So the first thing you want to do, of course, is find a common denominator if you're adding or subtracting. But of course, we change subtraction to addition. As you see in this example, 2/5 minus 1/2 becomes 2/5 plus negative 1/2. So here, I'm going to get a common denominator right away. So what's my least common denominator? If you said 10, you are correct. So I'm going to end up with negative 5/10 plus 4/10. And so what you really do here is you just add the numerators, keeping the signs with them so you can remember what to do. And since we have a negative plus a positive here, we're actually going to subtract to get negative 1/10. I'm going to skip the next example and go on to the one in which we have 3 different denominators, and we're going to do a quick review of how to get a common denominator using prime factorization. So first I'm going to change this to addition. So I get negative 3/8 plus 5/12, and I'm leaving lots of space to show my work, plus 5/6. Now I'm going to create the prime factorization for each denominator. So 8 is 4 times 2, and 4 is the same as 2 times 2. So 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. You want to break down what multiplies to equal 8 into prime numbers. 12 is 6 times 2. 6 is 2 times 3. So 2 times 3 is 6, times 2 is 12. And 6 is 2 times 3. So I'm going to start with my 8 and make sure that I have all the prime numbers underneath my 8 that all the others have. So my 8 has 3 2's. My 12 has a 2, a 3, and a 2. So I'm missing that 3 right there. So I'm going to multiply the denominator by 3. So now I have the 2, the 3, and the 2. Now if I go over to 6, I have the 2 and the 3 already for my 8. So now I'm going to move over to the 12 and make sure that I have everything that the 8 and the 6 have. So the 12 has a 2, a 3, and a 2. If I look over here at the 8, I have 3 2's. Well, for the 12, I only have 2 2's, so I need one more. So now I have all 3 of these, and I have the 3. And I look over at the 6, I need a 2 and a 3, and I have a 2 and a 3. So I'm good with the 6. So now I'm going to look at the 6 and make sure that I put everything that the other ones have. So the 8 has 3 2's. Well, the 6 only has 1 2, so I need 2 more. And the 12 has a 2, a 3, and a 2. Well, I have a 2, a 3, and a 2. So it looks like I have the same thing for all my denominators now. So now I can figure out my least common denominator. So my least common denominator, if you look in all of these, you'll see there's 3 2's. My pen is not working very well. And I have a 3. So that's going to be 4 times 6, which is 24. So my least common denominator is 24. Now I need to go to each fraction, and whatever I multiply the denominator by, I need to multiply the numerator by to get an equivalent fraction. So negative 3/8, I'm going to multiply the numerator by 3 since I multiplied the denominator by 3. For 5/12, since I multiplied the denominator by 2, I'm going to multiply the numerator by 2. And for 5/6, since I multiplied the denominator by 2 times 2, that's the same thing as 4. So I'm going to multiply the numerator by 4. So now I'm going to get some equivalent fractions. I'm going to get negative 9 over 24, since 24 is our least common denominator, plus 10 over 24, plus 20 over 24. And now I can add all of my numerators and keep the denominator. So we're ultimately adding negative 9 plus 10 plus 20 over 24. I like to add my same signs first. It just cuts down on subtracting. So I get negative 9 plus 30, which is going to equal 21 over 24. Now that's not completely simplified because both of these are divisible by 3. And you can use your divisibility rules to remind you 2 plus 1 is 3, so we know 3 goes into it. 2 plus 4 is 6, so we know 3 goes into it. So 3 goes into 21 7 times and 24 8 times. So our answer is 7/8. So now let's move on to our next problem. Now we're going to start working with mixed numbers. So this is -5 1/2 plus 8 3/5. So we're going to use our signs to determine two things. The first thing we need to determine is whether we're going to be adding or subtracting these numbers. Since we have different signs, which one would we actually do? We'd subtract, right? And one thing that can help you think this through is to think about it with just whole numbers. So for example, what if this was just -5 plus, now I'm going to actually round these, is -5 1/2. That could either round down to -5 or up to -6. I'm going to round it down to -5 and I'll show you why. 8 3/5 is going to round up to 9 because that is closer to 10 than it is to 8 because 3/5 is bigger than 1/2. Now I could have rounded the -5 up to -6 because 1/2 really we should be rounding up. However, since I rounded the 8 up, I'm going to keep the -5 as -5 and it'll be a little bit closer to the exact answer. So 9 plus -5 is what? +4, right? So you see how we subtract those two numbers if we were just dealing with integers instead of fractions to get the answer. And the other thing we did there was we determined the sign because we had more positives. So the answer was going to be positive. So we know by looking at the signs that the answer is going to be positive because we have more positives, and that we're going to subtract because we have different signs. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to solve this problem as if they were positive numbers. And so we're going to subtract them, and the bigger fraction, the bigger mixed number needs to be the top one, the first one you write down. So you can't subtract 5 minus 8. It's really 8 minus 5, right? Like when we did -5 plus 9, in our head we were doing 9 minus 5 is 4. You always do the big minus the little. So we're going to do 8 3/5 minus 5 1/2 and just pretend that these are regular positive numbers. So the first thing we need to do is get a common denominator, which is going to be what? 10. Yeah. So we end up with 8 6/10 minus 5 5/10. So when we subtract, 6 minus 5 is 1, so that's 1/10. 8 minus 5 is 3. Now we look back up here and we determine our sign. We had more positives than negatives, so we're just going to leave the answer 3 1/10. Let's look at another example. Oh, and before we move on, I want you to notice that the answer is 3 1/10. And if when we estimated 4 would be our answer. If we had rounded this to -6 plus 9, we would have ended up with 3. So that actually would have been a closer estimation. All right, let's look at the next example. We have -6 3/8 plus 4 11/12. So we need to, let's think about this with an estimation. So let's round each of these. -6 3/8. Well, 4/8 is 1/2. So is this closer to -6 or -7? We should be rounding to -6 because it's less, 3/8 is less than 1/2. And then 4 11/12, would we round that up to 5 or leave it a 4? We should be rounding it to a 5 because 11/12 is almost 1 whole. So now we can add these, and what do you get? -1, right? So this is our estimation. It helps us know if we're on the right track when we get our answer. And it also helps us to think through our process. We are going to subtract the numbers because they're different signs. And which one do we have more of, positive or negatives? We have more negatives, so the answer will be negative. So now we're going to work with this as if they were positive numbers. So we're just going to say 6 3/8 minus 4 11/12. Okay, so let's try using prime factorization to solve this problem. So what would be the prime factors of 8? It's 4 times 2, but we got to break it down, right? So 2 times 2 times 2. And what about 12? Well, that's 6 times 2, but 6 is actually 2 times 3. So 6 times 2 is 2 times 3 times 2. All right, let's see if we can figure out what's missing in each one. So the 8 has 3 2s. The 12 has 2 of those 2s, but it also has a 3. So what do we need? We need a 3, right? So we're going to multiply the denominator and the numerator by 3. The 12 has 2 2s and the 8 has 3 2s. So what do we need? We need another 2, don't we? So we're going to multiply the numerator and denominator by 2. So our least common denominator, if you look in both of those, we have how many 2s? 3 2s. And what else? A 3. So that's 4 times 6, which is 24. So our least common denominator is going to be 24. So we end up with 6 9/24 minus 4 22/24. Okay, so we are subtracting big minus little because 6 9/24, so 6 is bigger than the 4, right? However, we can't take 22 from 9 with our fractional part, so we're going to have to do what? If you said borrow, you're correct. So we're going to have to add 24/24 here and take it away from the 6. So we're taking 1 from the 6 to get 5, and we're adding that 1 to 9/24 as 24/24. And that's going to equal what? 33/24. Now we're ready to subtract. So what do you get when you subtract? 1 and 11/24. Now we want to look back at our problem and determine the sign of our answer. Do we have more negatives or more positives? We have more negatives, which we had determined right here. So we're going to put a negative in front of our answer, and that is our answer. So one thing I recommend doing, because it's easy to forget to put that negative in when you're done, one is to always go back and look at your problems and think about what the sign should be and double check that when you're done. And then if you're taking a test or quiz, when you're done with the test or quiz, always go back and think about what the signs of each of your answers should be. And that's the end of this video.